Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 78. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, commented on the show, and continues to spread the word. Your support allows us to bring on more expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Samson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room buildouts from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Samson provides professional weight room solutions for those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength and conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Samson as their top resource for all their weight room renovations because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovations, or upgrades, be sure to check out samsonequipment.com to see how Samson has been delivering clients a long lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. Also, want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out cerberusstrength.com and use promo code strength_game to save on your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Will Clayton. Will is an assistant director of strength and conditioning at the University of Nevada, where he oversees the training for the baseball and women's basketball programs. Clayton returned to his alma mater in 2019 after spending the previous year and a half as a coaching assistant at Fresno State University. He began his coaching career as an intern coach at the Parisi Speed School in Reno, Nevada, before interning with the Nevada Wolfpack in 2017. From there, he spent a semester as an intern at Allegiate Gym in Redondo Beach, California, and then as an intern coach at Washington State University in 2018. Clayton played for the Nevada Club Lacrosse team from 2011 to 2016, and has recently stepped onto the platform competing in his first Olympic weightlifting meet in the 96 kilo weight class. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Will Clayton. What's going on, everybody? Today, I've got one of my old coaching assistants slash intern slash full all-around assistant, Coach Will Clayton on the show. What's up, dude?
How's it going, man? It's good to be on.
No, I'm glad to have you on. We've kind of gone through the gamut of everybody from Fresno State, and I know I've been bugging you forever, and you finally did it. You finally did your first weightlifting meet after loving weightlifting and doing it all the time. You finally actually stood on the platform. So, hey, congrats on the first meet. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit, but how did it feel to actually get on the platform for the first time?
It was cool. It was different. I mean, being in front of people and having all that going on, like somebody right in your face telling you whether or not you did a good job. I actually got pretty lucky because I had no idea what was going on. The guy who ran the event came out. He started counting for me, let me know exactly how it was going to work. It was cool. I'm still weak, but it was good to get out there and at least get something up. Went 2 for 6 and it counted.
Hey, that's all
So
that matters. Two, all you need is two. You need one in each, and then you just got to step on the platform. But it's a good jumping off point, and that kind of leads me into what I just want to start off with always is like how you really got started in the strength game, and then leading up to what now was your first Olympic meet and like your college career as well.
so the first thing I ever did was middle school weights. I remember it super clearly. Ron Nelson, linebacker coach at the high school, was running middle school weights. And I don't know. I back then still kind of an angry guy sometimes, right? But it was just an outlet for me, right? Like it made me feel confident. I got to build myself up and um, just be able to do the things that I wasn't able to in sports, right? And it really gave me a foundation, like something to work into. Because I think a lot of times I was bounced around from sport to sport. I didn't really commit to anything, just because I was trying to do a little bit of everything. So once I got into like strength training, I realized how to just systematically improve myself. And from there, it just blossomed, right? I got deeper and deeper, got better at sports, got happier with myself, more confident, all that kind of thing that comes with it. And just kept me in college, played club lacrosse where I had to do everything myself. And I think that was where I really got the direction that I'm on now, working with team sports. So
No, that's cool. That's obviously like starting off by yourself and like learning. I mean, learning in middle school and high school is probably just a grab bag, depending on who's actually in charge or if you're just following like the upperclassmen or an old football coach or someone that actually knows what you're doing. So it's always random, but no, like the club lacrosse level, like playing it myself too, like after a while, like, yeah, you're doing everything on your own. And you kind of get to test stuff out and you get to see what it is without it being super structured. So it's definitely a cool feeling to like see when stuff is working and test stuff out and then kind of fall in love with it more than just being mandated how to do it. But yeah, it's got its drawbacks as well too, because you don't know what you're doing, and then like maybe after a while you get hurt, or maybe after a while you're doing really well, or you have no idea. So uh,
right.
it's a start point, same as like getting on the platform and doing your first weightlifting meet. Like it's a starting point to kind of jump off of. But yeah, that led like into a coaching career. So when did you know? Because I know for undergrad and everything, like you did work with like kinesiology was your emphasis and everything, but like you have a nutrition background as well. Like what kind of shifted gears and drifted you towards like sports performance coaching and everything, and leading to like your job now as assistant director like at Nevada?
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know if you knew this. I started out in mining engineering, was what I did for my first year and a half of school. I really had no idea what I was doing, but both my parents were. So that was an easy way to start. From there was no kinesis program my sophomore year when I switched. So that's why I switched over to nutrition, and then they still don't have it. They just have the emphasis, right? So nutrition was the closest I could get to understanding more about the human body, right? So that was what I wanted to do. um I think the transition into team sports was, I mean, I was writing programs for my friends and stuff, like you said, when you don't always know what you're doing, right? I did a lot of stuff wrong. And there's, the experience I had before that, there's a reason I didn't talk about my high school strength program, right? Like there was a lot of, I was exposed to a lot of dumb stuff and stuff not done the right way. So I was really trying to figure out a lot. Um, but so were my friends, my roommates, the guys I hung out with, my teammates, like everybody needed a program. So I just ended up, hey, you know something about this, why don't you write us a program? Or hey, can I get in the weight room with you? What are we doing? So I got pretty lucky. Like I did well enough that I never really had a big injury, right? I took care of myself, and I figured out through class and through reading, and I had a couple of different internships during my undergrad where um, I got to focus, and I had a couple of people in my ear giving me good ideas. Again, there was another guy, my my mom's personal trainer actually pushed me towards like, hey, you should go check out the NSCA. You should start thinking about your CSCS, do all those kind of things. And that was part of where I started getting a little more information, so that when my friends needed help, they needed something, or I was trying to do my own stuff, it fell into place. I don't know. There's something cool about being on a team. Like the draw of team sports is always the common goal. I realized pretty quick. My very first internship was working for that guy and a couple others. at a personal training facility, and it just, at the end of the day, when you leave and there's nothing else, like that's it, right? Like you send them home, and yeah, they're going to go be a good accountant or a good whatever, right? But like Saturday, Sunday, there's nothing going on. We don't have to fight. We don't have to compete. The consequences are of not working hard are delayed, I guess. Delayed and very individual.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that was kind of the one thing besides like probably a multitude of other reasons. Cause I started like before I even knew I wanted to go coaching, I worked as like whatever, like a floor aide or cleanup guy or something, like at a big gym in my local area. And I always watch and I'd shadow and kind of talk to some of the personal trainers and see what they were doing. And it seems super transactional, even though I didn't like know kind of what that term was or like how that worked in the coaching setting. But it really was like this person shows up on the hour, you train them for that hour, the amount of effort they put in, the amount of effort you could be on your phone, you could be talking to other clients, you could be just kind of fucking around. Like it doesn't matter. Like they get a sweat and that's all they care about. And there's not super much more to it. I mean, you'll get different clients or you'll work in a different setting where that obviously differs. And you can argue that some people are really fulfilled in that moment. But yeah, like I think the same reasons for you, like being drawn to like working for a common goal, being part of a team in some sort of aspect, like I mean, there's a reason why people play sports and the reason why people want to stay involved in sports in some aspect. And like for us, like strength conditioning and coaching was one of those avenues to still stay involved and be a part of a team in a different way. So no, I completely relate to that. And I mean that those personal training experiences they kind of shape what direction and what avenue you're going to go when you get to the fork in the road and people have like an exercise science degree, like which career path are you going to take? And for some people it is like have at it. But I know at least for you and me that was not the path that we were chosen for.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I had a couple of clients that were really, really great, right? And understood the value of it and wanted to do that. But then, half the people just want somebody to talk to while they train. Some people are just, they know their doctor said they have to be there. So they're going to show up every day and put in minimal effort, get minimal results. But hey, they're getting their 60 minutes of physical activity for the day, like 3 times a week. And that's enough to satisfy their doctor. So hopefully that gets them where they want to be. Right. And the other side of that too, is I don't know, there's something beautiful about team sports and being in that environment, right? Like I said, that one of the first experiences I had with that was understanding how to just systematically better myself. So to be in a college setting where I can share what made me feel like I'm a better person and be happier with myself with people who are leaving home for the first time on their own, we're in that era of mental health issues and all of that, right? To be able to share what gave me confidence, that's on top of being able to go out, like you said. I think you told me one of the days that you realized that this is something you loved was walking out onto the field with the team, right? Like that day, walking out, getting there for the warm up, seeing how they shift, like they turn on, they're ready to go, and being a part of that that's something I will always want a part of somehow, you know?
No, I completely relate. And I completely understand too. It's a different feeling. I remember that specifically like when it kind of clicked. So no, it's a cool feeling. And it was cool like working with you at Fresno to kind of see that start to come together. Like when you got your first team and like it was fully yours and you got to take ownership over it. Like you were in charge of whether they succeeded or whether they failed. It was ultimately going to fall off your leadership. So it's different when that responsibility is put on your shoulders too. and you really take ownership of that. But that came after a lot of like different experiences that you had. Like obviously you started at Nevada, like you were there and you interned, and now you're in a full-time role. But between that time, you spent a lot of time at the private sector, a lot of time at different universities, kind of gaining some experience. What kind of changed now that you can reflect back at both your time at Nevada, like from intern to now full-time coach? Like, why was it so important for you to go out and get more experience? And do you really think you would have been prepared had you had just stayed at Nevada from intern and kind of just make the step up to GA, maybe make the step up to paid intern, make the step up to like full time?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot to it. There was some of the I first of all, let me answer your question directly. I would never have been prepared, and I would not be half as good as I am if I had just stayed here. I've worked with some really good guys, some really good coaches, not just guys. And I learned a lot. It was a good foundation, but I mean, the 3 months I was working for Coach Karen at Allegiate, that was the most concentrated learning I think of my life. I, to be honest, I feel like I failed a little bit at Washington State. Probably not a little bit. I blew my shot at Power Five football right there. Right, that could have completely changed my career path. And I don't think I did a good enough job there. I didn't represent myself well, but that helped me to move on to the next thing and realize how I needed to approach it and how I needed to go about my day-to-day stuff. And then get into the opportunity at Fresno. I mean, Fresno had its things going on, right? Where I got a lot of experience. And I tell a lot of people, like, it almost felt like a smaller school, but at a D1 level, because it was just, okay, this isn't getting done, jump in. Like, hey, this person's gone right now. We need to take care of that, right? So I got an opportunity to work with a lot of different sports, which allowed me to learn and grow. So yeah, I mean, it's every part of it was great. That private sector little area helped me get some different perspective on like the private sector, right? So being at Allegiate, it helped me understand how we could create a team environment, right? Like Coach Karen is an incredible coach in the way he sets stuff up. So seeing a program that felt like a college program, but was private sector, really made me rethink what I could do in this, right? There may be something that maybe down the line, maybe I think college coaching is kind of a young man's game, and I'm good in that for now, but we'll see where it goes long term, right? But to know that can be done in a different perspective was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I think it's super meaningful to actually get other experiences outside of it. Like there's some people that have stayed in college forever and that's the only kind of side they know. There's people that stay in high school. Um, you don't have to intern or have to work at those levels to understand what they are, but you can go shadow people and kind of talk and speak with others to know what the day to day looks like. But you don't really know what it is until you're enveloped in it and you understand like the day to day operations and what it takes to actually like there's a grind to like all these jobs as much as I hate that word, but you really have to understand what it is like to link days together and link seasons together and stuff to really know what that sector of coaching looks like. So it's good that you were able to get all those experiences and at different levels and stages, because I really think no matter what, every job that I've ever taken, whether it's an intern, full-time job, a GA, whatever it is, like you still have some sort of level of imposter syndrome. Like I shouldn't be here. I don't think I'm ready. There's other people that are qualified. Like I don't know how I got this job, but you're never going to feel like you're prepared enough. And I think that's a mark of a good coach too, because you want to make sure that you're successful and you're doing more. So to pick up on those experiences and also for you to reflect back and understand like, hey, maybe I didn't do such a good job at this place, or maybe this program wasn't exactly what I want to do. Like those are good kind of like after action reports where you look back and you realize that like my program wouldn't be the same, or I could do this differently the next time I do it. And that's always going to be improvement. All those failures are going to be more improvements for you. And I'm sure that you could probably attest to it. That's kind of what's prepared you for what you're doing today and in your current position and probably your future ones going forward.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I I still have in the back of my head, right? I have a couple of these coaches yelling at me like, I'm feeling tired, or a drill's not going right and I'm starting to get frustrated with it. I hear Coach Tyson Brown in my ear, move your ass, Will. Like, and I get up and, you push it a little bit. It's um all of it. Like there's so much good information, whether it came from a mistake or something that went well, right? And it's without that, I don't know how I would know half the things I know, right? And I think part of that too is like I rely on frustration a lot to try to push me into things. Like when something's not going right, that's a time that I feel that I'm gonna grow more. It's if a team's not pushing themselves as far as I want them to, or whatever it is, right? Like if what we're doing has an impact on the success or the failure or the livelihood of other people, that like you gotta use that to push you forward, right?
Right. I mean, that pressure is either going to crumble people or it's going to press them into diamonds. So, like, it's nice to have a little bit of pressure like that. Obviously, like being relieved of pressure on holiday break or things like that is always helpful to kind of recharge because most strength coaches are all about pushing it to the limit and forget that recovery is just as important. Um, but that pressure and that kind of constant fight to improve, I think, is what propels a lot of people to be in those jobs. And it's a helpful tool for sure. I mean, not using it for evil all the time definitely helps because you need that time away. So like from your time, obviously, like you got to take over programs when you were at Fresno State, and then now like that was kind of a trial barrier because you had that kind of escape where there was a safety net for you. Like obviously myself and other coaches were there to kind of oversee what you're doing. Everybody at every level, whether you're full-time or intern, there's still a hierarchy of coaching. So you still have that same kind of oversight at Nevada, but you're in charge. Like you're assigned to these sports. Like these are what you're doing. Like, can you kind of speak to like first year coach or someone taking over a program? Like, what were some of those like struggle points or maybe things you weren't quite as prepared for or less confident in? Like, when you are the lead coach for a team, like, what were some of those things that were maybe difficult or you would kind of give out as a warning for someone to be more prepared for when they are the head strength coach for that team?
Um, I think the biggest thing that I was nervous about was, how do I come in and tell an athlete how to prepare for a sport that I've never played before, right? Like my first two teams were soccer and water polo. I'd never even watched water polo before I was working with that team, right? So that was something that worried me, but I mean, there's ways to figure that out, right? That's one of the things I talk to my interns now about is like, what do you do to become an expert at something that you've never done before, right? And I think a lot of that it's just preparation, right? Before you even go talk to a coach, you better know, and you better know what you're talking about, right? Like if you don't know if there's quarters or halves or the size of the field or the basic stuff before you ever walk in that room, like you're already in a horrible place. And I think at the beginning, I didn't necessarily do a good enough job of that, right? Like it took me way too long in this to actually write a needs analysis, and just do like the basic stuff to where, if we had a conversation about the sport, yeah, I don't have to be an expert, but to be competent is critical, right? Because then everything gets framed differently. So if you're nervous about coaching a soccer athlete and telling them how this is going to apply, like you got to know enough about the sport to be able to say, hey, we're doing this because this movement, like we're going to squat because I need to make your legs stronger, because that's the basis of not just speed, but jockeying, knee health. Like, so you can go down the line of, hey, these are the injuries I'm trying to prevent. This is all that. So like, yeah, like you just have to prepare. You just have to know what's going on. So that was, I think, the first thing that I was nervous about, but that was a simple solution, right? Just get ahead of it. Being on the floor and being in charge was the other part. I don't think like I'm still not great at it, right? Like that's one of the, I feel like I could be better. I guess I should say that I'm pretty decent at it at this point, right? But there's just like parts of coaching that nobody talks about. Like now when I'm thinking about things, the last thing I think about are the exercises, sets, and reps. Like that is so far down the list of things that you need to be worried about to run a team. But that's the very first thing I thought about at the beginning, right? It's like, what exercises do we need to do for what reason? And what should the rep scheme be? And how should we vary that over and over and over again? When I got athletes that are walking in, putting the same weight on the bar every week, aren't eating, aren't sleeping, aren't taking care of themselves. Like you can't just jump to the end like that and expect things to go well. And part of the reason I say that I'm not great at it is like one of my teams I'm a little bit frustrated with. Like I feel like we're not getting where we need to be, and it's a symptom of the culture of the entire team. So if that's not the first thing on my mind, then it doesn't matter, right? Like they could come out and do a set of 20 squats and probably get the same out of it some days than the best program I've ever written in my life. And I don't think that I emphasized that enough at the beginning. Culture and mental training and like knowledge about nutrition and sleep and all of that is just as important. And I think a lot of that falls on us, at least at the mid-major level, right? Obviously, there are some places that do that better than others, and have different resources and stuff. But if that's the role you need and you have, then that's what you need to jump into, right? And you need to do that really, really well before the X's and O's come, right?
No, I agree. I mean, that foundation, like kind of getting to the root of the issue, like X's and O's of strength conditioning fall really low on the totem pole. Obviously, if they're not executing things right, if there's bad character traits, the culture sucks, or like kids are late, like other like sport coaches, the head coach doesn't really see the importance of the weight room or training for that matter. Like all the other things are going to fall into place if you're doing the right things right all the time. And it's hard to kind of think backwards when you think, hey, we're evaluated based off how strong they are, how fast they are, how prepared they are for games. But I think all the soft skills, all those things come first. And it's sometimes it's hard to explain that to a coaching staff that sees you as the weights guy or sees you as like the version, like human steroid version of what makes them better versus like really a lot of stuff coming between the ears being a shoulder for them to like burden some of the stress of school and athletics and teammates and things like that. Like it's an outlet. But the weight room is an outlet for them as much as it is a conduit for them to actually improve physically, like mentally, emotionally, all that stuff. I think is just as important. I mean, you brought up a really good point. Like obviously the culture is huge. I know it's a buzzword and everything just in strength conditioning. I mean, the business world, everywhere. The hard part, though, for strength conditioning, for those that are like in the college setting or in a team sport, is helping shape the culture as like a support staff member. So obviously, like you work with two teams, baseball and women's basketball, and just the nature of those sports have different kind of cultures to them, different training aspects, different a whole slew of different things that kind of make them differ. As like a support staff member, how do you kind of work on trying to help improve the culture in some way when really you're not the one that's supposed to set it? You're supposed to the one that's kind of you're an enforcer for the culture, but if the culture isn't exactly what you envision it, like how do you subtly kind of try to make improvements on it without almost overstepping your bounds and taking the place of what the head coach's job is supposed to be?
Yeah. Thankfully I have two head coaches that they have good plans and good thoughts on how to do that. So a lot of it is, I mean, first of all, just being around and understanding what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to say, right? To be able to echo stuff and the coach is trying to emphasize this is what we saw in the game, this is how practice has been going, and be able to see things in a bigger context, I think, is a big part of understanding how to insert that information and help people move towards the right, like the same goal, right, that everybody's trying to do. And then it's just figuring out how to fit what I believe and what I see as being the right course of action into that context, right? So if a coach is upset with the team because they're not putting an effort, and then you come back the next day to weights and they're like, oh yeah, we're sore, we're tired, we did all this, we did all that, then it becomes, they can talk about, hey, we need to focus, we need to do this, that, and the other thing for practice. I can come back on the other side and it's like, okay, well, all right, if you're sore from traveling, what did you do on our off day after we traveled? Oh, nothing. Okay, well then maybe we need to, this needs to be the attitude, needs to be what you need to do, right? Oh, you're sore, you're beat up, you're coming in for extra work. Okay, well, you don't get to come in alone anymore, you have to bring somebody else with you, and that's how you start building these things. So it's, if you have the big picture and you see what the bigger things are, it's, and what the entire staff is pulling towards, it's, I find it to be pretty simple to combine those two thoughts and all be pulling the same direction. Because that's critical, right? Like if you're not all pulling the same direction, the whole thing's not going anywhere, right? Yeah.
No, I agree. There's again, it's kind of like same thing that we were talking about, like the X's and O's kind of just fade into the background. Like all the other things are so much more important. And if the ship is going in the right direction and everybody's pulling in the right direction and has the right attitude and effort kind of driven towards it, it makes it a lot easier for you to start actually implementing proper programming and like actually get more into the weeds on all those things if your team is actually doing those small things properly to start with. It's, I mean, it's a complicated system. There's a lot of things that go into it that's why the profession is probably as interesting as it is, and it's as frustrating as it is at the same time. But that's kind of the nature of the beast. Hey, so kind of touching a little bit on what you were doing lately, like kind of gearing up for your first weightlifting meet. I wanted you to kind of talk on like maybe some of those mental barriers, maybe not personally, but maybe for anybody that's kind of going into their first competition. Like you probably had some personal things, obviously, with like past injuries or like not confident in like getting on the platform. But maybe speak on what took you so long to do it, and maybe touch on a little bit of what it felt like after like actually getting on the platform for the first time and like leading into what you're going to do next.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of parts to it. I think, first of all, I think that I'm I'm surrounded by strong people, right? So when I'm gearing up for a competition, right, it just felt weird to me to walk in like, yeah, I'm stronger than some people, but the people that I'm surrounded by, there's people with terrible technique that are way stronger than me, right? So as a coach, as somebody who sees this and coaches up every minute detail of what somebody's doing, and then to not feel like feel like I should be stronger. I think that was part of what held me back a little bit, is like I didn't want to step on that platform and throw up terrible numbers. And then I finally did, and I threw up terrible numbers, not all right numbers, right? But I didn't meet the goals that I wanted. And I'm watching my coworkers throw around some weight that I could barely touch, let alone get overhead. I think that was something that was in the back of my mind. Like I wanted to do well. And once I was in it, that kind of went away. I I realized that like everybody was just out there. Like I'm not competing for anything. It's the Olympics. It's not like, so I just get up there and throw some weight around and have, the encouragement of everybody around me. It was actually really cool. I got to watch some really, really good lifters, some really good athletes just in general. There are a couple of people that qualified for, like I'm blanking on the college championship. It was just cool to be in that environment, and nobody was, I don't know, nobody was making fun of me, none of that. Like we were just out there trying to do our best. And I think that was really encouraging. And it's a good first place, right? Like I didn't do that great at numbers, but I like to joke that I have an unofficial state record because I had no competition in my weight class. It was a new weight class, right? So if I would have paid $15, I would have been in the Nevada record books. Um, but it was that part. Now that I'm in it, like it's fine. I'm gonna go do what I can, and it just enjoy the experience, because it was really fun. Like it was fun to the whole process, like having something to train for again. That like figuring out a taper like that, like right, like a true taper, because so much of my training is based around a season. Um, it's just not something I've done a lot. The competition day, dropping a little bit of weight, so I made my weight class, and being able to stuff my face as soon as I weighed in, like it was just a fun experience. And I think the other part of that, like talk about training, it gave me a little more perspective and a little more empathy, right? Like when I was playing lacrosse, it was Division II club lacrosse on the wrong coast, right? So it's not like it was a super high level. But I was doing all the things that made sure that I felt good. So a lot of times when athletes were talking about, oh, I feel sore, I'm tired of this, that, well, they're like, what did you do to help yourself feel better? And it's like, oh, well, nothing. Then it's like really frustrating to me, right? But now I'm a little bit older, full-time job, trying to train, trying to have a life outside that. I just finished up my master's. Um, all these things, like you realize that it's actually exhausting. Like, it's not as easy to spend half an hour stretching every night and make sure I feel good, right? Because now I've got a couple of things. Like I don't have previous injuries. Like I just got a couple of like nagging things that I haven't been taking care of, right? Like my knees hurt all the time for some reason, right? Like every once in a while my back bugs me. Like, but it's stuff that I know exactly how to deal with. Like it's very simple. Like if I stretched like I used to stretch, I would feel fine. If I would have warmed up before I did a bunch of jumping, like my knees wouldn't be bothering me all the time. And if I did the things that I know I need to do to make them feel better, it would go away. But, after a full day of work, class, like I don't want to. Like I want to go to sleep. Right. So it's helping me be a little more empathetic with athletes, but also figure out new strategies that I can share with people and say, like, yeah, I'm not saying you have to stop everything you're doing, like throw on a movie and stretch for 15 minutes, right? Like stand up halfway through your studying and do a little dynamic in the library. Like it's fine. Nobody's like, it's good for you. People might give you a little side eye, but like that's, if that makes you feel better at the end of the day, that's worth it. Right. So I think those are the two biggest things I got out of training was just empathy for doing the little stuff. And I shouldn't have made such a big deal about it.
No, I mean, you learned a lot of stuff from it, and I'm glad you finally did. I think every time that I would actually text you, that's what I started with. The conversation was like, when the hell is your meet? And I hope I peer pressured you enough to finally do it. But no, I know from my experience competing, and obviously like it's the same. Like we're both not out there setting records, even though you could have paid $15 to have a state record. Um, like we're not out there like sponsored, getting like professional looks for any of these things. We're paying our own entry fee. Like we're training for fun. We're going out to compete with other people that are doing the same thing, trying to have fun. It's not their livelihood. It's a hobby. I mean, that we can take as seriously as we want. We can kind of discontinue when we want, or we can invest a lot more time and effort into it. And I think it's a good thing to have on the side, especially when you're involved in athletics and you're involved in coaching too. That's why being on both sides of the barbell, I think, is so important. Like having empathy for your athletes is super helpful. Like obviously the older, like we're not going to get any younger, and if we stay in college, both of us, where you're going to see the same age athletes all the time. Like they're going to be somewhere between 18 and like 23 always, and we're just going to get older every single season that comes around. So you get a little less disconnected from them, and a little more farther removed from when the time you played college sports was and when you played team sports. So to be involved in some way and understand what training looks like and understand what the rigors of balancing everything together, like with school, like friends, sports, all the training, everything together. I think that makes it a lot more relatable, and you can continue to have those conversations with them. And that's huge. And I know for me, like training with a goal in mind is helpful. And everything that we do, like strongman, weightlifting, Highland Games, whatever it is, like you pick as a strength sport or you pick as a team sport, like you get to try your own programs out. You get a little bit of trial and error, and you get to train for something. So it's I think it's a win-win. No matter if you only get on the platform once a year, if you get it on like 10 times a year, it's still something cool. So hopefully you get another one lined up in the future, and you can kind of build off of your first one.
Yeah, that's the plan. We'll see. I between these two seasons, it's going to be kind of a grind here where my trainings, but I mean, hotel gyms, right? So I can get a couple a week, and then I'm gone every other weekend. So the plan is to do a couple next year and try to do a little bit better and just keep going, right? So hopefully I can get my mobility and my body feeling right so I can get a little bit more done next year.
There you go. Hey, we'll touch on that too, because obviously, like you work with two programs where you're traveling, not maybe all the time. You can probably speak on that a little bit more, but between women's basketball and baseball, like those are your primary teams. So you're on the road with them, and like, yeah, you're probably getting hotel sessions in for yourself and for the team, or away at different facilities. So what's the dynamic been like working with those teams, especially when they're crossing over in season? And how have you been able to kind of work with them on the road, like traveling in light of having a long competitive season for both of them?
So this is actually my first year that I'm doing both of these teams. So we'll see kind of TBD how some of this goes. I already know I'm going to miss. I mean, I have to prioritize the way we always do it is we prioritize in-season teams and then conference competition, right? So I'm going to miss the first couple of weeks of baseball, at least the first couple of weeks, hopefully more than that. hopefully basketball does well enough to keep going. So we'll kind of see how that part works out. That's still kind of to be determined. Basketball this year, I mean, it all depends on the format of the season, right? They're kind of in a weird thing. I feel like once we get in conference, we're going to be away on Thursdays and home on Sundays for some reason. Like our travel is split, which from a training aspect, I think that'll be a kind of a positive. I mean, that's kind of lame for them in school and just travel in general. But from my perspective, I mean, that puts us, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, definitely Monday, Tuesday, probably some Wednesdays, depending on what's going on, where we have an option to do what we're trying to do. And then it's just managing fatigue, right? So thankfully, I have some help. There's 3 of us that work with baseball, even though I'm the lead. So while I've been on the road with basketball, I've had some good help that I can tell them, okay, this is what we're trying to do. This is how it's going to work. So you can take care of baseball while I'm on the road. A lot of the travel is going to be during break, which will be a positive. And then once we get into baseball season, that's the big question mark as of now, because they really want me to travel and it's a new staff. With a midweek and a 3-game series, that really takes me away for a lot, depending on where we're at. So the trick is really just finding opportunities, right? When we went on a longer trip to San Diego, it's, can we get in touch with the strength coach there and maybe get the team in there for our pregame lift? Because that's a little more, I need to figure something out with that for these trips where we're traveling. I might not have access because that's a little more equipment intensive. So that's going to be, I mean, at the end of the day, it's maybe some jumps, some throws, some plyometrics. It's not like we're getting super heavy with stuff the day before a game. So that's something that should be pretty simple, but it's figuring out what space you have and what equipment you have, right? If you can't figure out how to do what you're trying to do with any kind of equipment, you got some learning to do. I'll keep from saying anything mean. But like that's like a skill that we need to have, right? Like that's the reality of what we do. If we're going to be on the road, you got to be able to figure out the best way to do what you're trying to do with the equipment you have. Because I mean, that's the optimal way to train, right? Or at least what they're used to, that needs to be continued. So it's finding little opportunities like that, right? Like if we're in town Monday, Tuesday, they're off on Monday, we're going to get that good training session in on that Tuesday, do our pregame lift, however we can get it done, and move on to that.
No,
but we'll see.
Yeah, like it's gonna be a learning process, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, between a new team like women's basketball kind of being in the full swing for your first year, and then a new staff with baseball, obviously there's a lot of expectations you kind of have to manage, and that's a difficult part with having overlapping seasons or just mid-major schools where there's a high expectation, there's a standard they want to uphold, but there's only one of you and there's only a certain amount of time. So, I mean, obviously with you having good help, having other coaches and interns be able to kind of hold the fort down as you tend to one of the teams in season or conference season, like that's super helpful. And it's always a mark of a good staff when you're able to do that and kind of facilitate everything for the most important time of the season for whatever team you're working with. So hopefully you guys have some success going into the end of the season, like conference championships leading into baseball start of the season, but it'll definitely be a whirlwind where you're learning on the fly for sure. So I guess like speaking on like that coverage with teams, like we talked about you getting into your first full-time role and like leading programs, and now you get to see what the juggling act is with competing teams and competing staffs, like vying for as much of your attention as possible, especially like being on the road. How are you kind of working on giving back and working with some of your interns now, kind of in more of a mentorship role? That I think that's the beauty of like college coaching or strength conditioning in general. There's a natural kind of hierarchy for experience and background, and not just positions or titles, but everybody's kind of giving back to the next line of coaches. So you're not too far removed from those roles and like the positions they were in, but kind of speak on how you're working with them to kind of mentor them and get them prepared for when it's their opportunity to kind of be in your role in your seat.
Yeah. The first thing is I do lean on my previous experience as much as I can, right? Like I try to think back to the things that I liked and I thought helped me prepare and get better and try to emulate that. I was in some situations where I got to be honest, like I was pretty frustrated. Like I feel like I didn't get the help that I needed, or um, someone was way quicker to correct something that was wrong than to go out of their way to make sure I knew how to do it right. So I think that's the biggest thing is like I'm trying to be, very communicative and share information better, right? So I actually have been working on our internship curriculum for a while now, and I'm trying to think back, like, what did I not know? What do interns coming in seem to struggle with, right? And then making sure that there's some kind of structure to sharing that information, because I think sometimes people have a tendency to just kind of throw stuff together and not follow that plan, right? Like, which should come very natural to us, right? Like I have a periodized education program should like be pretty simple, right? Like that should make sense to us. And there were times where I felt like it was just, oh, well, you messed this up, so now we're going to talk about this. Like, oh, you messed that up, so now I'm going to tell you about that. Instead of, hey, this is, starting with like, oh, who was it? Is it Wooden who has like the sock thing? Like the very first thing he taught his athletes is like, hey, this is how you put on a sock so that you don't get blisters. Because if you get blisters, you're out for a week and we're going the wrong direction, right? So it's almost like that. It's like, okay, here's a barbell. Here's how we take care of it. Here's how we need to take care of the facility. Here's how you need to stand to be able to get a good view. Here's how you should approach an athlete while they're training. Here's the way you should speak to an athlete mid-set versus after a set versus before a set. So a lot of it has been just like taking a really, really big step back and saying, okay, this person doesn't know anything and I shouldn't expect them to know anything. So here's the building blocks of what we do and how I think about things. And then number two is when I have help with something, I'm trying to do a much better job of being specific and sharing the information that I'm trying to get across to the athletes, or what I want to emphasize, or how things should look. I actually, just this year, since I've had a little more dedicated help, I've been going through, I have started writing like the whole coach's view of what's going on, right? Like everybody has their sheet, everybody has their program, but now I have this other document that's a little less heavy on the X's and O's and a little more like, hey, this exercise needs to be fast. These athletes have been out. We need to take care of them a little differently. This is the idea I'm trying to get across. This is what I saw last week. These are the improvements that need to be made so that everybody's on the same page, right? And it's not just a comment in passing, because I know who I am and I know that I don't always remember things as well in that kind of setting. So to be able to say it, write it, see it is going to help me remember that a whole lot better. So as I'm going through, it's not just, this is what we're trying to do and you have to know exactly what I'm thinking. It's okay, here's my thoughts on paper. And then in that, like we have right now, we have a really, really good coaching assistant, intern assistant, whatever you want to call him. So it's been, and he does a really, really good job with his preparation. So it's trying to get in and talk to him and say, hey man, like, what are you worried about? What do you think? What topics are you going to bring up when you talk to this head coach? Because that was something that you helped me with that I had seen plenty of people come through and just not get help on. Like I had people like walk up and were like, okay, like here you go see your head coach. Like, good luck. And that's just not a good way to do these things, right? Like, yeah, he might know his programming and I've seen his needs and his analysis. And I've seen all the things he's put together, but that doesn't mean he knows how to go talk to a head coach who's gonna bring something out of left field, right? Like you're gonna have a long drawn out conversation about a specific conditioning modality or something that you never prepared for that's like outside your experience, your knowledge, and all that. So taking the time to actually like have good conversations and say, hey man, be prepared for this. I know this coach and they're going to bring up this and you need to be able to talk about it. You need to be prepared for it. Because if that first conversation doesn't go the right way, then you might be stuck with, a baseball coach who wants to run 300s, because you walked into that conversation. He's like, oh, well, I really believe in mental toughness and this is what we need to do. And you're not prepared to say, hey coach, like that's dumb, but like in a polite and professional way. Right. So I think again, like it just keeps coming back to it, right? Like my preparation and having everything far enough ahead of time that I can articulate that and present it to the people that I work with and the people that I'm trying to teach, the easier it is to help people learn and grow. Because that's, like I said, there are people who did a really good job of that, and there are people that I worked with that really did a terrible job of that.
Yeah, I agree. And like that, the sink or swim model, like for some of these mentorship programs and everything, like there's a time and a place for kind of taking the floaties off, taking the training wheels off, and letting that person actually like sink or swim and figure it out for themselves. But there's a time and a place for that. I remember kind of taking you over when you found out you were getting water polo and we were at Fresno. And like as much as I wanted to like let you go over and learn it and kind of meet the coach on your own, like after talking about it, we're like, we need to do this together. We kind of need to be united on this front and ease everybody into it. And I'm glad we did it that way because I've been on the receiving end of not doing that for anybody and that being done to me. And it's kind of sucks. And I mean, we both know we kind of got shark attacked by Coach Benson. Like she's
Yeah.
she's like a US Olympian and super successful, and she's a successful coach. And she came in hard with a lot of things that she wanted to do. Like she wanted the culture of the team to do this. She wanted them to read these books. She wanted these captains to do this. She wants these things to be done. She wants to do two-a-days. Like there was a lot that was being thrown. I mean, even for me, like I'm not the lead at all in this. I'm kind of just here to help facilitate the conversation and make sure that the team is taken care of and kind of assist you in any way. But yes, there's coaches that'll come in hard in the beginning and as a first time lead for a program, like that's a lot to take in. And it's a good, I'm glad you kind of took that lesson and you remember some of those things that you did at different internships and that's kind of shaping how your program is going to be thought out and prepared for like a curriculum. And yeah, there for the curriculum for everybody, like it doesn't have to be super stringent, but it should cover a lot of the things that go outside of programming, especially like we talked about before. Everybody wants to do like have the perfect program, but there's a lot more that goes into it than just this exercise at this time in this rep scheme with these percentages. Like there's so much more that's entailed in that. And honestly, you need to make sure that you're teaching your interns or grad assistants or the rest of your support staff or anybody that's with you. Like don't take those things for granted. Like just because you like know how to train a certain way or you know how to take care of a barbell, like don't assume that someone else coming in knows that. I'd rather like you're saying like hey, this is strength conditioning, this is coaching, this is how you take care of a barbell, this is a barbell. Like
Yeah.
however you want to Barney style dumb it down, like i'd rather I'd rather have said it than not have said it and assume they understand it and then go over it twice. I'd rather go over it twice any time of the day than assume that they know what it is and then for them to be like, you didn't prepare me. Like I really didn't know that. So no, I think that's a great point, and hopefully you continue to keep just adding to that more and more throughout your career. So anybody that works for you, or if you're a director one day, or if you have more interns that are working under you, like that just becomes like a living, breathing document that you can add to.
Yeah. And because at the end of the day, like part of what frustrated me as an intern sometimes is it it should not be free labor. Like I don't think that's what that should be. And I feel like some people looked at it like that, right? Like it's not, it is giving back. I you shouldn't even say it giving back. Like you are paying for their time, effort, and experience with knowledge. That's your payment. That's what you can offer them. And I think people lose sight of that sometimes. Like I don't want a mindless cleaning robot in the corner, right? Like I'll hire a janitor if I want that. Like I want somebody who's going to grow and care about my athletes and become a good coach or whatever, right? Like if I have somebody that ends up being a great personal trainer out of this, then fine. But like at least I'm giving them the right tools and mindset to be good at something. So,
Yeah.
and it's like pay your interns the best way you can. And in a lot of cases, that's going to be knowledge.
No, I agree. I mean, after doing 5 internships for free, I could say that some of them were not necessarily worth it. I mean, I learned everything from all of them, whether it was what I want to do or what I don't want to do. Like I learned in some way, but you definitely really harp on the ones that give you a lot more value. And it doesn't have to be monetarily. It can be knowledge based. It could be experience. It could be networking. Um, it could be anything. But yeah, I take that stuff to heart. I mean, you've done a lot of internships. You've worked for free at a lot of different places. Um, Free in the sense of you're not collecting a paycheck, but you're gaining experience in some way, and you could see how I think you can understand the mark of a really good program based off how they treat their interns and how they treat their quote unquote free labor or their part-time help or whatever they are. I mean, that's a huge mark for it. And that's why I've always taken pride in trying to lead the internship program or a coaching assistance or that mentorship stuff. It's a lot of work because at the end of the day, you still have to make sure your teams are taken care of and you're doing your job so you don't get fired, but you're really helping shape and mold like the next crop of people that are coming into those coaching roles. So I think it's important. And I wanted to touch on too what you said, like with the coaching points and like kind of documenting more than just the training program. I know one of my mentors at Georgetown, like he takes like stupid meticulous notes all the time, and he always has a bunch of journals. He even like writes down the music that they were playing, like whatever Pandora or Spotify station was on the radio that day. Basically, like the time they started lifts, what guys were coming in, what they ate before, like kind of the temperature of the room. And he keeps those notes so that he can reflect back on them. Like, yeah, everybody keeps the programs that they do and like what you did on Monday or what you did, what you're doing the next lift coming forward. But I think it's if like just as important, if not more important, to have a gauge of what the room was, what the talking point for the day was, maybe what a conversation was. Because if we're both saying that it's more important, the conversations you're having and how a program was executed over like just the X's and O's of, hey, we did split squats this day, so we'll do back squats this day. Like that, if that stuff's important, you should find a way to keep track of that and be able to reflect on it and refine it and actually make some improvements.
Yeah. Because that's, I mean, sure, it's cool to have all those numbers and things, but like there's so much more that goes into it, right? Like, yeah, well, we had PR and max effort back squat. Like, that's cool, but like, what did we actually do to prepare for that? Because it wasn't just 3 months of training, right? Like, it wasn't a semester of training that caused that. It was the sleep, the recovery, the like the energy of the room, right? Did everybody come in dead? Well, like, yeah, you're gonna have a bad training session. Like, did coach put them in the dirt conditioning wise because they had a terrible practice? Like, of course you had a bad training day. So to be able to understand that and be able to reflect or provide input, and like when a coach comes to you at the end of the semester, hey, these were our goals. Do you feel that we met them? Yes or no? And you say no, and you don't have a real answer, or you're going off your memories or your feelings or whatever it is. That's not like, we can't just do subjective measures of things 3 months later and say, hey, that's what happened. Right? Like, yes, it may be scary to come out and say, like, I didn't do a good enough job of this, but at least you know which way to go. Right? Like, it's way easier to come in and say, hey, I didn't do a good job of this. This is what I'm going to do to fix that moving forward. That's a whole lot better answer than, hey, I feel like we did pretty good, so it's, yeah, I mean, some people may take a bit too much notes, but like, if you don't understand, it's very hard to pinpoint a cause and effect in all this, right? But the more information you have, the closer to the right answer you're going to have. And that's, if we're not asking the right questions and getting the right answers, then, that's how a lot of things fail.
No, it's a good point. I mean, too, that if you're not evaluating what you did or having an idea of how to improve on those things, obviously, like there's a difference between having 10 years of experience versus repeating 20 semesters, like, and just over and over and over again. Like, there's got to be some progress. And a big thing is being humble and not having an ego to be able to say and reflect and say, I did a bad job on this. Like, I could improve on this next time. And I think most coaches will realize that, like, maybe you're being overcritical, or I don't think most coaches are going to think, yeah, you're really bad at your job. It's like, no, like you actually sat back and evaluated and are constantly trying to improve. And I think that's the type of coach that they want to have on their staff, someone that's going to sit back and reflect and say, well, next time I'm going to do this better. As long as you're not making the same mistake 10 times in a row, then that's someone that they want on their staff for sure. Hey, so like any good training session, we end the show with a finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and maybe overtime at the end. So you can take your time or you can go rapid fire with these, but you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in strength and conditioning and person you're looking up to right now in Olympic weightlifting.
Ooh. Man, biggest influence. Gosh, somebody. All right, so man, there's so many names that come to mind. That's so hard to pinpoint one person. I think that someone I look up to a lot as far as coaching is Coach Karen. I mean, that's one of the smartest people I've ever been in a room with. Like, going through some kind of reading and thinking I have a good handle on it, and then sitting down to talk with him about it. An hour later, I realized I don't know anything about anything. Was a pretty incredible experience. Olympic weightlifting. I mean, I gotta say Wes Kitts. I had the opportunity to do my USAW at Cal Strength. So to be coached up by him and then see his training and how he goes about things, genuinely good guy too. And to see, like, I think he was thinking about retiring after the last games, and now he's maybe going for another cycle. So sure, we'll go with him.
All right. Hey, so what can you be found doing when you're not in the office or in the weight room? What are some of your hobbies outside of coaching and competing?
Really, I'm just trying to do anything outside. We finally got more than just a pickup league of lacrosse, so I'm still playing that. I actually got I think I might have broken my finger the other day, playing lacrosse, but that, hiking, snowboarding, love getting up in the mountains whenever I can.
There you go. Perfect season for it right now. Hey, so if you weren't coaching, what do you think you would be doing as a profession right now?
Um, Man, if I wasn't doing this in this setting, I'd be doing it in a different setting. I love this. Every day I wake up and there's nowhere else I'd rather be. But if you want a better answer than that, I'd be a mining engineer. That stuff, it made a lot of sense to me. So when I was in school, that was like our dinner conversation. So when I got into school, it was very simple to me. It made a lot of sense. And I think I still look at some things in that kind of context through that frame, the human body still operates on physics and there's still support structures and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of that feeds into how I view the human body too.
All right, all right. Hey, so setting up an ideal training day for yourself, what is playing through the speakers and what is the best post-training meal after that lift is done?
Oh my gosh. What, like a good high effort day?
Yeah, like either what's normally on the radio station or what's like your go-to PR song.
Oh gosh. Man, I'm all over the place on that too. Like that could be anything. That could be um like I like a lot of rap. Like could be Throw It Up by Lil Jon, like I don't know, something like that, or it could be some metal. Like good old Pantera every once in a while. Never hurt anybody, but yeah, something like that. Something with a lot of juice. But I'll tell you, there's plenty of training days where I'm listening to country anyway. Um, Perfect post lift meal, probably sushi, man.
All right, all right. Last one I got for you. Because obviously, like you said, you would have been coaching in a different realm if it wasn't here. What is your favorite part of coaching?
Seeing stuff click for people, like when somebody figures out, um, well, I mean, it's quickest in a movement, right? Like when you see somebody just finally understand, like they've been hesitant to hit a clean, and then finally they just smoke one, and it looks smooth, it looks beautiful, and they get that look on in their eyes, like, did you see that? I was like, yeah, I saw that. That was beautiful, and that like it just suddenly makes sense, and everything's easier after that. That that's really cool. But like in the longer term too, it's cool to see athletes come back and say, hey, do you remember when you told me about this, or you taught me this stretching modality, or you told me that this is how you finally gained weight? Like, man, that worked for me. Like I feel good. I met whatever goal I was trying to reach. Like it's just really, really cool to me to see people meet their goals or like grow. Like that's such a cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, I agree. Like being a small part of those athletes' journey and hopefully like towards their success or what they actually want to do as a goal for their career or just part of those 4 years, their livelihood, like whether it's athletics or something else, it's awesome to just kind of be along for the journey, along for that ride a little bit and help in any way possible. It's a cool thing to see that stuff click on the platform, on the field, or just hear about those stories when they come back around and hopefully they come back to visit at some point. So no, that's a great kind of way to sum everything up. But hey, so for anybody that's got any questions or want to follow around what you've got going on for the season with both the basketball and baseball program in Nevada, how can they get a hold of you and reach out or follow along?
All right. Well, like we talked about, I don't do a ton with social media, so that might not be that much out there. But if you want to follow me, I got you can throw it up, but it's Gains by Beard on Instagram and NV Coach Clayton on Twitter, although I'm way more of a spectator on Twitter. But if you want to reach out, feel free to shoot me an email, wclayton@unr.edu. I'm always happy to network and catch up with people and answer any questions. Always looking for interns too. So if you're interested in that, feel free to shoot me some information.
There you go. Yeah, I can't say Gains by Beard or by me right now. You got me beat at the moment for sure. So it's looking good. But Hey, I appreciate you coming on today, man. It's been a while in the works, and I'm glad I peer pressured you finally to do a meet, and hopefully it's the first of many. But hey, really good luck with the rest of the season. And I mean, it's cool to see you now, like back at your alma mater, kind of back where you started it all off. I mean, I think you've come a long way since Fresno State, so it's cool to let you kind of get a hold of the reins and now start to kind of be in that position I was in before. So I'm happy for you, man. And I like I said, I appreciate you coming on today to share with everybody.
Yeah, man, I'm glad I could get on. I'm glad I'm finally worthy now that I got my competition. It's been, I look up to you a lot. A lot of the stuff you taught me is part of how I framed a lot of this. So it's really cool to be back on and talking to you and get to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is my way to kind of connect. So this is kind of my cool thing to see former interns or colleagues and still be successful. And like that's my kind of click moment too. So I'm happy to have you on. I'll peer pressure you now for your second meet and then probably the third and then I won't stop until you're either in a wheelchair or it's probably over. So no,
Perfect.
appreciate you coming on, man, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate it, man.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.